The Galactic Council chamber hung in the black between stars, a giant ring of dark metal and glowing shields circling a dead star. Inside, hundreds of alien beings filled the high seats, some made of crystal, some of mist, some with too many eyes or no eyes at all. They had come from every corner of the galaxy to watch the trial of a species they thought they understood. At the center of it all stood 3 humans. They wore plain gray clothes. No armor, no weapons, no fancy tech. Just 3 people on a small platform, surrounded by beings who could crush planets with a thought. Ambassador Riva stood in front, calm and steady. Behind her were Lieutenant Kale, young and quiet, and Dr. Mira Voss, who watched everything with sharp, thoughtful eyes. A tall, bird-like alien with shimmering wings rose from the highest seat. His voice boomed through the chamber, translated into every language at once. "Species Sol 3, he said, you are accused of breaking the oldest law in the galaxy. You woke what should have stayed asleep." Rivas didn't move. She just looked up at the towering alien. "We were defending our home," she said simply. A blob-like creature from the Slith Collective bubbled with anger. "Your world was under quarantine. You were supposed to stay quiet, to grow slowly, to never reach the stars." Rivas turned slightly, her eyes scanning the crowd of aliens. "You put us to sleep," she said, "but you never asked what we dreamed about." Before anyone could respond, something strange happened. Outside the chamber's great window, the stars began to dim. Not one by one, but all at once, in a perfect circle, like a ripple moving through space. The light from distant suns faded, then returned, then faded again. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a weapon. It was something deeper, older, and far more powerful. Every alien in the room froze. Comms crackled with panic. Ships outside reported strange readings. Gravity bending in impossible ways. Time slowing in patches. Signals looping back on themselves. Rivas turned fully toward the window now, her face lit by the dying starlight. "You broke the one rule," she said, her voice low but clear. "Don't wake the humans." She paused, then added, "Now you get to meet what that rule was really protecting you from." Silence fell over the chamber. Not the kind of silence that follows shock, but the kind that comes before a storm. The humans didn't look afraid. They looked ready. Lieutenant Kale shifted slightly, his hand brushing against a small device on his belt. It wasn't a weapon. It was a recorder. He had been capturing everything, the Council's words, their fear, their arrogance. Back on Earth, billions waited. Not for war. Not for revenge. But for proof that the galaxy finally understood. Dr. Voss watched the alien delegates closely. She saw the fear in their postures, the way their lights flickered or their fluids stilled. They had spent centuries believing humans were primitive, loud, messy, emotional, and weak. They had studied Earth's wars, its pollution, its mistakes, and decided humanity wasn't ready for the stars. What they never understood was that human weakness was also their strength. Humans cried. They laughed too loud. They built cities and then tore them down to build better ones. They wrote songs about heartbreak and poems about the sky. They sent messages into the void hoping someone would answer. And all that noise, all that feeling, it hadn't been wasted. It had been building something the galaxy had tried to silence. Now it was awake. The bird-like arbiter finally spoke again, his voice quieter now. "What is happening?" Rivas turned back to him. "You thought we were the danger," she said. "But we were just the lock, and you picked it." Outside, the stars stopped flickering. Instead, a new light appeared, soft, golden, like sunrise over an ocean. It wasn't coming from any known star. It was coming from Earth, not a weapon, not a fleet, just light. But in that light, every alien felt something strange. A memory that wasn't theirs. A child's hand in theirs, the smell of rain on dry soil. A song they'd never heard but somehow knew by heart. The council began to murmur. Some stood. Some backed away. One delegate, a being of pure energy, flickered out entirely, overwhelmed. Riva stepped forward closer to the edge of the platform. "You wanted to judge us," she said. "But you never asked why the rule existed in the first place." She looked around at the frightened faces. "It wasn't to protect you from us. It was to protect us from you. Because if we ever woke up fully, you wouldn't be able to control what came next." The golden light from Earth grew stronger, filling the chamber with warmth. Alarms blared on distant ships, but no one paid attention. Every being in the room was caught in something deeper than fear, something like recognition. Lieutenant Kale finally spoke, his voice calm. "They're not attacking," he said to no one in particular. "They're remembering." Dr. Voss nodded. "The sleeper isn't a weapon. It's a mirror, and right now it's showing them what they lost when they stopped dreaming." The council had come to punish humanity. Instead, they found themselves standing before something they couldn't classify, couldn't command, couldn't even fully understand. And the worst part, for them, was that the humans hadn't done a single violent thing. They had just stood there and waited, because the real power wasn't in ships or lasers or laws. It was in the fact that for thousands of years, humans had kept dreaming even when the universe told them to be quiet. Now the dream was wide awake, and it was looking back at the galaxy with human eyes. The Arbiter slowly lowered his wings. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Riva smiled, not a cruel smile, but a sad one. "We don't want anything," she said. "We just want you to stop underestimating us." Then she turned and walked back to her team. The three humans stood together, small against the vastness of the chamber, yet somehow filling it completely, outside. The golden light pulsed once like a heartbeat and then faded, but the feeling it left behind didn't. The trial was over. The real lesson had just begun. After the stars dimmed and the golden light faded, the Galactic Council fell into chaos. Ships that had been circling Earth suddenly went silent. Their crews stopped responding to commands. When contact was finally re-established, the voices on the other end sounded strange. Calm, confused, speaking in old Earth languages no one had used in centuries. Some ships began playing music from Earth's past. Piano sonatas, folk songs, even children's nursery rhymes. No threats. No demands. Just sound back on Earth, nothing changed. Cities stayed quiet. No armies marched. No weapons fired. The planet simply existed, breathing like it always had, as if the galaxy's fear meant nothing to it. Dr. Mira Voss sat alone in a small room aboard the Council's detention vessel. The walls were smooth and cold, made of a metal that absorbed sound. She had been separated from Ambassador Rivas and Lieutenant Kale after the hearing. Guards watched her through invisible sensors, but they didn't speak to her. They were afraid. A new visitor arrived that day, a tall, thin being made of interlocking metal plates. His name was Trell, a cyber envoy from the Vorn hegemony. He didn't need food or sleep. He only needed data. "You activated something," Trell said, his voice flat and sharp. "What was it?" Voss looked up from her cup of synthetic tea. "We didn't activate anything," she said. "We just stopped holding it back." Trell tilted his head, plates clicking. "Explain." She set the cup down. "Long ago, before your ships ever flew, before your species learned to count, something landed on Earth, not a weapon, not a scout, a ward, a seal. It wrapped itself around our planet's magnetic field and went quiet." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It fed on human thought, on stories, on dreams. Every lullaby sung to a child, every prayer whispered in the dark, every painting made just because it felt right. It all fed the sleeper. And in return, the sleeper kept something else away. Something worse." Trell processed this. "You are saying your species was a battery?" "No," Voss said softly. "We were a cradle." She explained that for thousands of years humans lived without knowing. They fought, loved, built, destroyed, and dreamed, all while unknowingly keeping the sleeper stable. But during the Vexian Purge, when alien warships bombarded Earth's outer defenses, the shock of it, the fear, the pain, the sudden unity of billions facing extinction, overloaded the sleeper's dampeners. It woke up, and it thought humanity was its child. Trell's plates shifted. "Then why does it change reality? Why do our ships see false worlds?" "Because it doesn't understand your kind," Voss said. "It only knows human memory, so when it reaches out it rebuilds what it knows. A Roman Empire that never fell. A world covered in oceans. A city where everyone knows your name. It's not attacking you. It's trying to make you feel safe, the only way it knows how." Trell fell silent. For the first time, his logic circuit struggled. This wasn't warfare. It was care, twisted by scale and misunderstanding into something terrifying. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kyle had vanished from his cell. Security logs showed him walking down a corridor, then stepping through a solid wall as if it were mist. Guards reported hearing whispers in English, Russian, Swahili, languages they'd never heard before. One guard swore he saw Kale standing in two places at once, one version young, the other old, both smiling sadly. The truth was stranger. Kale wasn't escaping. He was connecting. While the council saw the sleeper as an outside force, Kale understood it differently. It wasn't separate from humanity. It was woven into them. Every human who had ever lived, every soldier, poet, farmer, scientist, had left an echo in the planet's field. And now, with the sleeper awake, those echoes were becoming real. Kale could hear them. Not as voices, but as feelings. A mother's worry. A rebel's courage. A teacher's patience. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a bridge. Back on Earth, people began to notice changes too. Old dreams returned with new clarity. Grandparents remembered childhood songs they hadn't thought of in decades. Children drew pictures of starships they'd never seen. In libraries, ancient books glowed faintly at night. Not with light, but with meaning. The council sent probes to study Earth. Everyone failed. Not because they were destroyed, but because they started sending back data that made no sense. One probe reported Earth's atmosphere was 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% hope. Another claimed the planet's core pulsed in time with human heartbeats. Scientists called it madness. But the data kept coming. Ambassador Rivas, held in a high-security wing, was allowed no communication. Yet every night she dreamed of standing on a beach she'd never visited, watching waves roll in under two moons. In the dream, a voice, soft, ancient and kind, whispered, "They are learning." She woke each morning with salt on her lips. The galaxy had always measured power in weapons, in territory, in control. But humanity's power was different. It couldn't be counted or contained. It lived in stories and choices, in the quiet moments between heartbeats. And now that power was spreading. Ships that had once carried soldiers now carried questions. Crews who had trained to kill now sat together, sharing memories of home, real or imagined. A Cathari warrior wept when he dreamed of holding his daughter, even though he'd never had one. A Slythe engineer began sketching human faces in the ship's gel log. Unable to explain why, the sleeper wasn't invading, it was inviting, and the most terrifying part, for the council, was that no one could stop it. Not with force, not with logic, because you couldn't fight a feeling, you couldn't shoot a memory. Dr. Voss was finally allowed to send one message back to Earth. She didn't ask for rescue. She didn't warn of danger. She simply wrote, "Tell them we're listening." On Earth, the message was received by a young girl in Nairobi. She didn't know why she was chosen, but when she read the words, she closed her eyes and whispered them into the wind. And somewhere, deep in the dark between stars, the sleeper heard. Lieutenant Kale reappeared 3 days later, standing calmly in the middle of the council's war room. No alarm sounded. No guards moved. They just stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. He looked at them and said only this: "You thought we were the fire, but we're the spark that reminds you how to feel." Then he walked out and no one stopped him. The council held an emergency session that night. Some demanded Earth be erased from the maps. Others argued that humanity had become something new, something beyond species or law. But all of them felt it now, the quiet hum beneath their thoughts. The dream they couldn't shake. The strange warmth in their chests when they looked at Earth's blue glow on their screens. They had come to judge humans. Now they were beginning to understand them, and that was far more dangerous than any weapon. The sleeper did not fire beams or launch missiles. It did not crack planets open or boil oceans. Instead, it changed what was real, for a little while in small places. A Cathari warship blinked out of normal space and reappeared orbiting a green world with marble columns and chariots racing under twin suns. The crew stepped onto the deck and found themselves wearing togas, speaking Latin, certain they had always served the eternal Senate of Nova Roma. They did not panic. They felt at peace. Another ship from the Slith Collective woke up floating in a deep blue ocean under a sky with no stars. Their gelatinous bodies had hardened into coral shapes. They pulsed with slow, happy thoughts rooted to the seafloor. Dreaming of tides and sunlight, they did not remember war. They remembered song. This was not illusion. This was rewriting. The sleeper reached into the minds of those who threatened Earth and gave them new pasts, gentler ones, kinder ones, built from human memory. It did not punish. It offered a different way to be. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, fear turned to fury. The Vorn hegemony, a proud and ancient war culture, refused to accept this soft defeat. Their leader, General Kor, stood before the council and slammed his armored fist on the speaking stone. "This is mental corruption," he roared. "Earth is infecting our minds with false history. We must burn Sol 3 from orbit before it spreads." But even as he spoke, his own aide stared blankly at a small screen showing an old Earth film. Black and white, grainy, showing a man dancing with a woman in the rain. The aide whispered, "I remember this, but I've never seen it before." The council was breaking apart. Some delegates argued for peace. Others demanded total annihilation. The bird-like arbiter tried to restore order, but his wings drooped with exhaustion. He had dreamed last night of sitting on a wooden porch, drinking something sweet and warm, watching fireflies blink in a summer dusk. He did not know what fireflies were. But he missed them. Ambassador Rivas was brought back to the chamber under heavy guard. She walked calmly, her hands empty, her eyes clear. The arbiter looked at her and asked, "Can you stop this?" Rivas shook her head. "We never started it. The sleeper acts on its own. But we can talk to it." She asked for a private meeting. Reluctantly, the arbiter agreed. They met in a small soundproof room with no windows, no guards. Just the two of them. Rivas sat down and pulled a small device from her pocket. Not a weapon, but an old music player. She pressed a button and a soft voice filled the room, singing a lullaby in Mandarin. The notes were simple, gentle, full of love. "This is how we calmed the sleeper during the Neolithic age," she said. "Before cities, before writing. When humans were just learning to dream together." She explained that the lullaby wasn't just sound. It carried a pattern, a rhythm that matched Earth's magnetic field, that matched human brain waves during deep sleep. For thousands of years, songs like this had kept the sleeper quiet, content, wrapped in the warmth of human care. But now, she said, it's not just listening to one voice, it's listening to all of them. Every human who ever lived. Every story ever told. Every hope ever whispered in the dark. She looked at the arbiter. "The more you attack us, the more it pulls from our past. And the stronger it gets." Then she gave him the real truth. The sleeper doesn't see you as enemies. It sees you as lost children. And it's trying to give you a home. The arbiter sat in silence for a long time. Outside, alarms blared again. Another fleet had gone silent. This time a peacekeeping squadron from the neutral rim worlds. They were now broadcasting Earth weather reports from the year 2042, describing sunny skies over Paris and light rain in Mumbai, as if it were the most important news in the galaxy. Rivas stood. "You have a choice," she said. "Keep fighting and the dreams will only grow stronger. Or listen, really listen." Before the arbiter could answer, every light in the room turned red. Not the red of danger, but the deep red of human blood. Warm. Alive. At that moment, Lieutenant Kale appeared on the main view screen of the council chamber, though no one had called him. He stood on a hill on Earth, wind in his hair, looking up at the stars. "I'm not here to threaten you," he said, his voice calm. "I'm here to show you something." The screen changed. It showed Earth not as a planet, but as a web of light. Every city, every village, every grave, every library, every hard drive, every handwritten letter glowed with soft energy. These were not power sources. They were memory anchors, places where human thought had pooled like water over centuries. "The dead are still with us," Kyle said, "not as ghosts, as guides. And the sleeper hears them too." He pointed to a bright spot over Kyoto. "That's where a poet wrote about cherry blossoms falling like snow." Another over Cairo. A child once shared bread with a stranger there. Another over Buenos Aires. A musician played a song that made a whole street stop and cry. "This is our weapon," Kyle said. "Not fire, not steel. Memory." Then he vanished from the screen. In the chamber, the Vorn general stood up, trembling. "This is madness. We cannot surrender to sentiment." But even as he spoke, his own ship, parked in high orbit, began playing a recording. It was a young boy's voice, speaking in a language no Vorn had ever heard. "Grandpa, why do stars twinkle?" And an old man's reply, "Because they're saying hello." The general's armor clicked as he sat back down. His hands shook. Dr. Voss, still aboard the detention vessel, received a message from Earth. It was just 3 words. "Hold the line." She smiled. They weren't fighting a war. They were holding space for understanding, for change, for something the galaxy had forgotten how to feel. That night, the Arbiter dreamed again. This time he was sitting at a table with humans. They shared food he didn't recognize. Bread, cheese, something sweet with berries. They laughed. No one spoke his language, but he understood everything. When he woke, he made his decision. He called for an emergency vote. Not for war, not for peace, but for truth. Earth is not a threat, he announced to the stunned council. It is a mirror, and what we see in it is what we've lost. But before the vote could begin, the lights in the chamber shifted again, this time to the color of dawn, and on every screen, in every ship, in every mind within 10 light years, a single image appeared. A child's hand, drawing a star on a piece of paper. No words, just the star. And for the first time, the galaxy did not reach for a weapon, it reached back. The Vorn hegemony refused to accept what was happening. While the rest of the council debated, their war council met in secret. They would not be softened by dreams or lullabies. They would end this the old way, with fire. Their grand fleet, 50 dreadnoughts strong, powered up their engines and aimed for Sol space. They would strike from 50 light years out, using long-range annihilation beams that could turn Earth into glass before the humans even knew they were under attack. But the fleet never made it to jump point. One by one, their ships began to change. Not on the outside, on the inside. Crews reported strange feelings, warmth in their chests, tears for no reason, a deep longing for places they'd never been. Then the broadcast started. Not military codes or battle hymns. Earth television. Old sitcoms where families argued but always hugged in the end. News clips of astronauts walking on the moon. Footage of children chasing butterflies in a sunlit field. At first, the Vorn commanders ordered the signals blocked. But the signals weren't coming through antennas. They were appearing in the crew's minds. A gunner remembered baking cookies with his mother, though he'd been grown in a birthing vat and never had a mother. A pilot dreamed of walking through autumn leaves crunching underfoot, the air sharp and sweet. A medic found herself humming a tune she'd never heard, tears streaming down her face as she stitched a wound. Morale collapsed, not from fear but from feeling too much. On the flagship, General Kor watched his best officer kneel in the corridor, sobbing because he suddenly remembered holding his daughter's hand on her first day of school. The officer had no daughter, but the memory felt more real than his own life. Kor tried to hold the fleet together. He gave orders. He threatened punishment, but even his own hands shook when he passed a viewport and saw, for a split second, not the void of space but a quiet lake at dawn, mist rising off the water, a fishing rod leaning against a wooden dock. He didn't know that lake, but he missed it. Back at the council chamber, the mood had shifted. More and more delegates spoke not of punishment but of protection. A motion was introduced. Recognize humanity as a sovereign cognitive entity, a new class of being whose thoughts and memories shaped local reality. It had never been done before. But Earth was proving that consciousness could be as powerful as gravity. The Vorn ambassador stood and shouted the motion down. "You would give power to a plague?" he hissed. "This is not evolution, it is infection." But that night he vanished from his quarters. Security found his room empty. No signs of struggle. No escape route. Just a single object on his desk, a worn paperback book, its pages soft with age. The title read, "To Kill a Mockingbird." It was open to a page where a father tells his child, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." The book was not in any alien language. It was in English. And someone, perhaps the ambassador himself, had underlined that line in shaky handwriting. On Earth, nothing changed. No celebrations. No speeches. People went to work, tended gardens, taught children, told stories. But now, when they looked up at the stars, they did so with quiet confidence. They knew the galaxy was watching. And listening, Dr. Voss was finally allowed to return to Earth. As her shuttle descended through the atmosphere, she saw cities glowing softly below, not with the harsh light of war machines, but with the warm yellow of home windows. She closed her eyes and breathed in air that smelled of rain and soil. Lieutenant Kale met her at the landing pad. He looked tired but calm. "They're starting to understand," he said. "Not all of them," Voss replied. "No," Kyle agreed. "But enough." Meanwhile, the altered ships began returning to normal. The Roman Cathari remembered their true names. The coral slith reformed into their gelatinous shapes, but they were not the same. They carried the dreams with them. Some asked to stay near Earth, others requested human teachers. A few simply sat in silence, staring at the blue planet, as if trying to remember a song they'd almost forgotten. The galaxy realized the terrible truth. Humanity didn't conquer with force. They infected with empathy. And once you felt what it was like to be human, even for a moment you could never go back to seeing them as less. The council held its vote. The motion passed with overwhelming support. Earth was granted Tier 0 sovereignty, the highest status possible, reserved for forces that shaped reality not through destruction, but through meaning. But the real test came days later. A small Vorn scout ship, damaged and alone, drifted into Earth's orbit. Its comms were dead, its weapons offline. The humans could have destroyed it. Instead, they sent a rescue pod. Inside the pod was food, water, medicine, and a music player loaded with Earth songs. No words, just kindness. When the Vorn crew woke up in a medical bay on Earth, they expected cages. Instead, they found soft beds, gentle voices, and a window showing the sunrise over mountains. One of them asked through a translator, "Why help us? We came to kill you." The nurse, a young woman with tired eyes and a warm smile, simply said, "Because someone once helped us, and we remembered how it felt." That moment spread through the galaxy faster than any weapon ever could. The Vorn hegemony did not surrender, but they stopped attacking. Their fleet turned back not in defeat but in confusion. Their soldiers no longer saw enemies on Earth. They saw reflections of what they might have been, if they had ever learned to dream. And in the quiet between the stars, the sleeper watched. It did not need to rewrite reality anymore, because the galaxy was beginning to change on its own, not through force, but through feeling. And that, more than anything, was the true power of humanity. The Galactic Council did not meet in the dark ring around the dead star this time. They came to Earth. Their ships hung in orbit like silent birds, no weapons charged, no shields raised. Below them, the planet turned slowly, blue and green and white, breathing in the sunlight. There were no armies waiting, no grand defenses, just cities, forests, oceans, and people going about their lives. Ambassador Rivas stood on a hill outside Geneva, where the old United Nations once stood. She wore the same gray uniform, simple and clean. Around her, alien delegates gathered, some walking, some floating, some moving in ways human eyes couldn't quite follow. They had come not to judge, but to listen. The bird-like arbiter stepped forward. His wings were folded now, not in threat, but in respect. "We have voted," he said. "Earth is granted Tier 0 sovereignty. You are no longer under quarantine. You are equals," Rivas nodded. "Thank you," she said, "but that's not why you're really here." The arbiter looked down. "We saw what your kind carries. Not just weapons or ships, but something deeper. Something we lost long ago." Rivas turned to face the group. "The old rule was fear," she said. "Don't wake the humans because you don't understand what they hold inside." But the real rule should have been, listen to the humans. Learn from them. She paused, letting the wind carry her words. "You thought we were dangerous because we fight, but we're dangerous because we care, because we remember, because we dream even when the world tells us to stop." The aliens stood in silence. Some shifted uncomfortably, others leaned closer as if trying to catch something just beyond hearing. Then Dr. Voss arrived, walking up the hill with a small data pad in her hand. She looked tired but calm. "I found something," she said, handing the pad to Rivas. On the screen was a file, ancient, encrypted, buried deep in the core of the sleeper. It wasn't written in any alien code. It was in human script, and the date on it made no sense. It was from thousands of years in the future. The sleeper wasn't built by aliens. It was built by humans, not the humans of today, but humans from a time so far ahead that time itself had looped back. They had sent the sleeper into the past to protect their own origin, to make sure that no matter how dark the galaxy became, Earth would survive long enough to give birth to them. Humanity hadn't been guarded by outsiders. They had guarded themselves, across centuries, across lifetimes, across the very shape of time. The aliens stared at the screen, stunned. The idea broke their understanding of cause and effect, of history, of destiny. But somehow it felt right. Lieutenant Kale joined them, standing beside Voss. He looked out at the sky where alien ships shimmered like stars. "They're not here to take," he said quietly. "They're here to remember how to feel." And as if on cue, Earth sent its message not through weapons, not through demands, but through a simple pulse of light and sound, broadcast in every known language and many unknown ones. It carried no threat, no warning, no plea. Just 3 words repeated over and over: "We're awake now. Let's talk." The message spread through the galaxy like a ripple in water. On warships, in council halls, in quiet homes on distant worlds, beings stopped what they were doing and listened. Some cried, some smiled, some simply sat in silence, feeling something stir inside them that they had long forgotten. The Vorn hegemony, once the loudest voice for war, sent a reply. It was not a treaty or a surrender. It was a question. Can you teach us how to dream again? Back on Earth, children played in parks under open skies. Farmers worked their fields. Artists painted. Scientists studied the stars, not to conquer them but to understand them. And in libraries, old books sat on shelves, their pages holding the dreams of those who came before. The galaxy had spent millennia measuring power in fire and force. But Earth had shown them a different kind of strength, the strength of a lullaby, of a shared meal, of a hand held in the dark. The council stayed for weeks. They walked among humans. They ate human food. They listened to human music. They asked questions not about weapons or tech, but about love, loss, hope, and why humans always looked up at the stars and wondered. Rivas never gave a grand speech. She just lived, and in doing so, she showed them what humanity truly was. Not perfect, not peaceful all the time, but always trying, always reaching, always remembering. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, the Arbiter stood beside Rivas. "We came to silence you," he said. "Instead, you taught us how to hear." Rivas smiled. "We're not special," she said. "We just never stopped listening. To each other, to the past, to the quiet voice inside that says there must be more." The Arbiter nodded. Then he did something no one expected. He bowed his head just slightly, a gesture of respect older than his species. As night fell, the alien ships began to leave, not in fear but in wonder. They carried no weapons. They carried questions. And maybe, just maybe, the first seeds of new dreams. On Earth, nothing changed. Life went on. But something had shifted in the universe. The old rule was gone. In its place was a new understanding. Don't fear the humans. Learn from them, because in their noise, their mess, their tears and laughter, they held something the galaxy had forgotten: how to be alive. And for the first time in a very long time, the stars listened back.